I'm Zanny Minton Beddoes. I'm the editor of The Economist, and I am delighted to moderate what I know is going to be a fantastic conversation. We are talking about the future of war, and particularly the degree to which military innovation, technological innovation, is going to be the decisive shift that will allow Ukraine to win. And I would remind you I think the clearest statement of this was made by General Valery Zaluzhny, actually, in The Economist, where he wrote that the current stalemate can only be broken by a technological leap. And we are going to discuss the technological leaps that have been made, that will be made, and what impact they will have and how we can scale them up. And we have a fantastic panel, really, truly fantastic panel to discuss this. On the far end from me, the right from you, is Minister Oleksandr Kamyshin. He is the Minister of Strategic Industries for Ukraine. It is your job to ensure this happens. So we're going to find out how you're going to scale up these kind of innovations. Next to him, we have Dr. Gundbert Scherf, co-founder and CEO of Helsing, a unicorn, I think now, and one of the most important unicorns, I would say, in the world, but certainly in Europe, that is, if any company is going to transform Europe's military capability, you are doing it. Next to him is Maria Nazarova, who is a combat medic. If you were at the Ukraine breakfast this morning, you will have heard how movingly and powerfully Maria spoke. I can't wait to hear more about your living with this innovation or lack of it, so I'm keen to hear about that. And next to Maria is Will Marshall, who is co-founder and CEO of Planet Labs. You might think, why is Planet Labs here? Because Planet Labs is actually allowing a tremendous amount of innovation through the extraordinary imagery that it is providing. So we've got practitioners from all different sides. Minister Kamyshin has to leave at 5, so he is going to get disproportionate amounts of airtime between now and 5 o'clock. So it's not that I'm totally favoring him, and then you leave at 5 and we will continue the conversation. So I'm going to start with you, but I'm going to bring you all in at the beginning too. And Minister, I wanted to know, first of all, do you agree with General Zaluzhny that technological innovations will be decisive? And secondly, are you seeing those innovations and are you able to scale them up?
Who am I not to agree with the Commander-in-Chief? If he says so, we have to go and do the job. Indeed, the innovation is the key to moving on in this war. And no matter how people say, because some people say that we're still in the First World War with drones. Some people say that it's a completely different war, but nevertheless, we don't imagine the war now without drones, without EW, without all the rest. So definitely it's already a part of the combat, part of the medical evacuation, and part of intelligence and all the rest. So definitely it's a new page in the war.
And part of your role is to scale up Ukraine's capability of producing. Just talk in general terms about how you are doing that. And because there is now, I think, a growing expectation that Ukraine will become one of the great military industrial centers of Europe. And so it is your responsibility to get there. How are you doing?
Then indeed, we are rebuilding ourselves with the arsenal. And indeed, we produce, starting from self-propelled artillery systems, 155. We are quite good in that already. And moving on to defense tech, we are capable to produce something that flies from $350 an item up to something that flies up to St. Petersburg this night. It's produced in Ukraine. So we hit the target this night. And this thing flight 1,250 kilometers this night exactly. So from $350, small FPV drone, up to, let's say, 1,250, because we can do more now, I know. And all of that things are produced already in Ukraine. I'm sure that asymmetrical war will demand more things like drones, and I'm sure you will see more and more things happening this year.
And one more question for you before I turn to everyone else. It's not just the potential capability and the remarkable increase that we've seen in Ukraine's capability, but it's also the ecosystem. Seems to be a very different kind of ecosystem than the sort that you have in other countries, where the military-industrial complex is, large established businesses. This, I think, is a huge number of startups, that some of which have grown tremendously. Give us a sense of how you see that ecosystem.
Then if you would ask Dr. Scherf how long it will take for him to innovate back in Germany and how long it takes in Ukraine, you would hear the difference. If you would ask Maria whether she can buy a medical evacuation land robot from outside of the country, she would hardly find something, but in Ukraine we already got a number of systems. When I told her recently that we already got one in one brigade, she said wheeled or track, because she knows that we can produce both of them. And so these things evolved in Ukraine last year, and they will happen more and more, and trust me, the Ukrainian defense tech would be a destination.
So let's ask you, Gundbert, if I may. You've been given a challenge by the minister. Would it be faster to innovate in Ukraine now than in Germany? I mean, you did a pretty good job in Germany. And then I'm not sure that everyone here is as familiar as they should be with your company. So tell us broadly what you're doing and how it is, because you really are at the cutting edge of defense tech innovation.
Yeah, thank you. So great to be here, and great to see, by the way, the work of the foundation. Let me maybe start with the first one. Thank you. The first point, maybe Helsing, for those who don't know it, is we're an AI company, an AI software company, but we're purely focused on national security and defense. And we made it our mission 3 years ago when it was clear that we would unfortunately live through a different era, I think, of geopolitical conflict than the 30 years that certainly I had the privilege to grow up in. And we didn't, of course, know that it would happen, a year after founding, that, we would see this brutal, aggressive war launched on Ukraine. And so what we do and what we believe is that software and AI are absolutely pivotal elements, not for 2030, but actually for 2024 and actually already in 2022 when this war started. And so to your question on wood, I can actually say it's not even wood. I can even make it even more tangible and specific. So we've actually pivoted the efforts that revolve around the land warfare that Ukraine right now largely is, and are making all of our innovation on that area around the needs and the insights from Ukraine. And every time I speak to more traditional established defense companies, I always tell them, and also to the militaries, look to Ukraine not only as a destination of where you're sending things, but really we need to learn from it, because this war is changing so quickly. And that is, I think, what came out in the interview by General Zaluzhny. If you look at the beginning and you remember those big parades of tanks moving into Ukraine, this seems from like a different world today. And we've actually seen multiple phases of this war. To some extent, I liken it a little bit to the stages of the pandemic, where we always had to respond to things. And I think we need to think about it increasingly like that. We need to say, what is the vaccination, what is the technology advantage that the general and Ukrainians at large are asking for, and how can we give them that? And how can we act also as defense company more like research, like pharmaceutical companies that actually invest, and that's what we do. We invest our own money into things we believe in, and then we work in and with Ukraine to try and make it work. And to make this very tangible, 2 examples bring a bit of life to this. I just recently had in one of the big home countries a conversation with the Secretary of State, and I said about an R&D program they wanted to do, and I said, keep your change. We're actually doing this right now, at our own cost through Ukraine. We're going to bring the lessons learned back here. And I think we need to look at Ukraine as a destination of technology, but also as a sort of source of insight and increasingly of defense tech. Second example, to make it really concrete, when you are in Ukraine and you say, I've got this idea and this technology here, the immediate answer is, great, take those 2 drones, this afternoon we're going to try it out. It's unimaginable to do that in our home countries. You have to get permits. You have to reserve slots. You can't fly over a certain altitude in certain areas. And the people that you meet, the operators that are there, that bring back the insight from the front line, they have a depth of experience that is unheard of. So I really think that we're at a stage where we want to see in the future Ukraine being driving innovation. It already is today, and I think anybody that hasn't gotten that yet, I think is missing out on helping, but also is going to miss out on actually making our democracy safe and developing new deterrents through innovation.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to a lot of that, but I want to ask Maria next. I mean, from your perspective, you're looking at it from a different perspective, on the ground combat medicine. Is there a huge amount of innovation happening there? Does there need to be? And how do you think about it on the ground?
I love to call what we do innovation, despite if you look at that, you would probably think it's like improvised everything. And everything you think of when you look at a field hospital is it should not be like that. But it's the root of it is that rules of war don't work. Red crosses are always a target. You can't operate with tents that are used for mobile hospitals. If anyone has seen Black Hawk Down, one of the films which is solely focused on military medicine, not many more like that, it doesn't work like this. And most of the experience of our partners that we have inherited and have taught ourselves since 2014, it is now smashed in pieces, not because the partners were wrong, but because the war is totally different. So the amazing things that we do are innovation, but they don't look probably fancy, if I may say this about the AI and software technologies, but these are things that save lives now. People have made fun of civil drones that could be bought without permission. These drones save lives. I think you all know that. A thing you might have not known, we use them also to deliver medicines. And there is a person in this audience who knows how to deliver medicines to occupied villages, to civilians. So we help civilians as well. And if we got a message that there is a pregnant woman in occupied village and she needed some types of medicines, which will definitely not be delivered by those who have occupied the Russians, we have delivered it by a civil drone. We deliver tourniquets to our medic across the Dnieper River in Kherson district because we cannot evacuate our wounded, and this is why we just send more equipment to this. Is it innovation? We use the same things we had, we just use them in a different way to find a way to our patient, because our patient cannot wait. Our patient cannot wait for an agreement. Our patient does not ask if it has been tested and if we have 100 licenses. We just have to work with what we do. So we really developed that innovation, and I just hope there will be more time for us to put it on paper and to share that, because some of the basic principles of tactical medicine, which have worked over years, do not work now, and we reinvent them.
It's fascinating, and it's a side of innovation that I've sort of now learned a little bit about Miltech innovation. I've never even thought of this. Can you give another example in addition to drones? Drones I now get. Yes, Minister.
Another example of not fancy innovations in this war. In my previous life, I've been running railways. We made two types of medical trains. One type everyone knows, and second type not many people knows, but Maria knows again. So these trains, we never seen something like that anywhere in the world. But these trains saved so many lives, and they were so efficient that now that's the basic way of medical evacuation on the long distance. And I'm sure these lessons learned would be researched and learned well. I hope that no one else will need it, but that's another example of not fancy innovation.
I believe Sanitätsdienst of German Army Bundeswehr has already used these trains as they want to put it into program of Bundeswehr evacuation. They help a lot with that, but they also learn from that. And this is something that we see with many of our partners. In 2016, I've been trained by Americans. Today, we speak to these same surgeons that we have been trained by, and they are fascinated about the things we do.
Wow.
Despite it's absolutely not fancy.
I can tell you how these innovations appear. On the second week of the war, I've been somewhere in Dnipro, and I've seen how our wounded soldiers are being carried into the train. And the train was fully not adapted for any medical evacuation when we saw it, and that was actually the 8th year of the war. So we understood that we have to make something different, and that's where these trains appeared.
And how long did it take to reconfigure the trains?
The first train, it took us 4 days. 1 day for design, day and night, and 3 days and nights for refurbishing them.
Wow. Will, you have enabled innovation in a completely different way by providing a vast amount of data from your satellites. Talk us through, you also you didn't set up to be a Miltech company or even a Miltech enabling company, but you pivoted. Just talk, for those who don't know what Planet does, how you are helping a lot of this innovation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange adventure to go to space in the middle of a conversation about so real a topic as things on the ground that really matter for people's lives. But I'd like to make the case that the information coming from space is actually quite relevant, and we are working day to day to try to help Ukraine in a number of ways. So at Planet, we have 200 satellites. They image the entire landmass of the Earth once per day. So every spot of Ukraine is imaged amongst every other country on the planet. And then we also have a set of 20 satellites that can zoom in any particular location up to 10 times per day, so almost every hour during the daytime. So if you need a particular picture of Bakhmut or Mariupol or whatever, you can take a picture more regularly. Now, why is that relevant? That sounds all fancy, but this data set can and is being used in a number of ways. One is operationally, to understand Russian positions, going on their operational battles, but also in the humanitarian sense. We've done for the UN a building damage assessment, which building by building across all of Ukraine, how many hospitals, schools, residential buildings and so on are affected, so that we can start assessing how much is it going to cost to rebuild. We, with partners at NASA, Harvest did a field-by-field assessment of how the crops are doing in every farmer's field across all of Ukraine, which type of a crop, and how well is it doing. And interestingly, if there's munitions in the field that are unexploded, so that the MOD, the military, could go in and remove those so that the farmers can get back to work. Of course, Ukraine's food supply is important for Ukraine and also the rest of the world as one of the breadbaskets of the planet. And one final thing, it's been used a little bit for forensic analysis of what's happened. So when the Russians were pushed back by the Ukrainians, there were mass graves that were discovered using satellite data. And then the question was, because we keep every layer going back through time, can we see who did what? And providing evidence to prosecutors in Ukraine and international court systems and so on. Look, I think it's a fascinating innovation that's happening. Necessity is the mother of invention. We're seeing that. What really is happening in many ways is there's two sort of wars happening simultaneously. One, a very classical war with tanks and bullets, and there Russia has the upper hand with more tanks and more bullets. And then there's an information war, which is aided by AI, but it's really about drone data and satellite data and people's cell data and their doorbells and with the cameras and all sorts of other data sets coming in and being triangulated and processed using AI to triangulate what's going on in very practical ways to help Ukraine. And there, Ukraine has a massive advantage for multiple reasons. Firstly, because it has been more inventive with that technology, and because it must. And secondly, because companies like ours want to lend our hand as best we can to help, and we don't want to do that for Russia, thank you. And so, I think that in that sense, that lends to Zaluzhny's suggestion that the technology is going to be what is needed. If your armaments are being used more efficiently, then you don't need as many of them, because you know where to attack or what have you.
Can I sort of turn that question actually to you, Minister, because I'm sure that's true, but at the same time, we are actually, unfortunately, seeing innovation from the Russians too, and capabilities improving in some of these areas, drones, whatever, and they have people who are supplying them. And it's now become a sort of, I hear it so often, I'm about to say obvious thing, but the sort of common conventional wisdom seems to be that 24 is a year where relatively they're building up faster. It's a better year, if you want to use that for them. What is your assessment of that? And what is your assessment of we've heard now about the inventiveness, the potential from Ukraine. Many Ukrainian companies, many Western companies that want to help. Do you feel that, so first answer the Russia question, and then secondly, the degree of confidence you have that everything is coming together to accelerate the not just the pace of innovation, but the scale that you need?
If you see Russian innovations, then actually they start with copy-pasting, because sometimes they just pick up Iranian drone and learn how they can produce it over a year. Sometimes they just pick up another Israeli drone, copy it and call it Russian name. And finally, they start with copy-paste, definitely. But it would be not smart to underestimate the enemy. And they're good in replicating their copy-pastes, and they're good in scaling up, because they're vertical. We're horizontal. We got 200 companies that produce everything that flies, goes on the ground, on the water, and underwater. And we are strong with our people, our engineers, our creative people, iron people. And these 200 companies collaborate with Western companies, with Helsing, with Planet, with others, and finally we get a better product. And the best ones would be scaled up. And the final point is having enough funding to scale up and to grow into a bigger company. I'm sure that out of those 200 companies, 10 unicorns will evolve. And I'm sure that 100 more companies with decent evaluation will be born in Ukraine. Because again, defense industry is something new in Ukraine, but it will grow, and innovation is the key for this growth. We got what we need. We got people. We got creative people. And I'm sure that Helsing and Plant, they benefit from working with our people, engineers, army people, but all of them are quite creative. That's something that adds the value to short innovation cycle.
May I quickly add on what the Minister just said? So that's a difference between horizontal and vertical is extra important with the army people, because I've only witnessed it in 2022, how fast a sergeant, a soldier can reach out to higher command with an idea, especially what is about innovations. Because when we got trophy IFACs, individual first aid kits of Russians, in 2022, it looks like it's First World War, even worse. It's very bad. It kills a person. It does not help. But when you open an instruction to it, it has been signed by 14 professors of their military medical academy. And this is why, because a soldier would not reach out. In our country, in our army, I reached out to our higher command, and we could change the IFAC, the medical doctrine, etc., etc. So that's a very important thing that they will never have, and this is why the innovation is at our side, I would say.
And if I can add one more thing as well, of course, we mustn't underestimate Russia's innovation, especially in indigenous innovation as well. But if their allies are North Korea and Iran, they're not going to get the same level of technical capabilities that they're going to get from the West. It's just nothing close.
No, they're just getting quantity at the moment.
Yeah, they will get some quantity, but I mean, it's very old tech, right? And there really is advantages to new.
I'm conscious that the Minister, we only have you for 7 more minutes. So you say you need money, but it's money and orders, presumably, and a clear pipeline of orders so that you can build up and scale up the capacity. But also, what is it like to deal with the orders and procurement and those kind of systems of the Western company? I mean, I'm assuming they're slightly slower than you are.
Zanny, it's a disaster in every single country.
I was being diplomatic.
If you ask Helsing how is that in Germany, they would probably say the same. Like what I've heard from defense industry, it's same in every single country. Again, this year we can produce already more than we get funded from local budget. Again, external funding is crucial for us. That's why innovation will be developing on and on once we got funding in the system. We don't expect any developments, any investments in CapEx. We do it on our own. We don't expect any fundings for R&D. We do it on our own. We haven't got used to external funding for R&D or CapEx. But proper procurement and proper orders, that's something the system urgently needs, and that's something that will fuel further innovations.
And is that, and obviously you understandably won't want to go into too many details, but do you have a sense of broad areas that you're really confident that Ukraine is going to be a kind of a real sort of, not just innovator, but a sort of center of excellence?
Well, definitely defense tech would be part of that.
Yeah, but within defense tech, I meant. I mean, are there...
Well, defense tech, that's everything that starts from surveillance drones, moving on to kamikaze drones, moving on to medical evacuation drones, and all types of that, EW and all the rest. But again, this innovation goes into every single niche, starting from combat zone, finishing with medical evacuation, and on and on. Because again, once you've got the solution, you can use it in different areas.
And how is the cooperation, Gundbert, between, I mean, clearly with your company, it's great. Is your sense, you deal with, Western military establishments, you work closely with your Ukrainian partners. Give us a sense of how those two ecosystems are different.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one abstract notion, but I'll give you first an anecdotal one that involves the minister before he has to run. So I was in a meeting in a big European country, I won't mention which, with CEOs where the minister was making a case for further support. And some of the companies said, well, we've encountered a couple of sort of challenges in delivering, and we would like to resolve those with you. And who could be our point of contact? And I think I can say that you said, well, I'm your point of contact. I'm the responsible minister. And people couldn't believe it. They were looking for someone from the embassy to found a working group. So literally, and so I think it's hard to overstate the sense of urgency and what you described, this ability to move from the expert somewhere on a tactical level to the senior decision maker and back and do that very quickly. And that is very sort of innovation prone. In a more abstract way, but a very important way, I think you mentioned ecosystem initially. I think that's a very important word. I think the vision we always had when founding Helsing, I think is also what's now panning out in Ukraine, is that defense will have to change fundamentally. We used to have very complex vertical platforms, a fighter jet, a tank, super complex things, and they are owned by one company, really. And I think what the war, because it's changing so quickly, is showing is they actually need to be horizontal pieces in a bigger software system. And Ukraine has developed Krapiva, an open system architecture where you can integrate things, you can upgrade it with AI capabilities that us and others can provide. You can feed it with data that a planner can provide. It's becoming a horizontal system, plug and play. And a lot of the new companies that are coming up also in Ukraine developing that technology, they all have to work within this system. If you're not compatible with some of the major sort of software systems, if you don't work in an open architecture, you're just not going to really be integrated. And I think that basically, is the way we're going to see the future pan out. And that very practically means that, when we go there and we say, we have the following capability that could help you solve the next challenge of the war. There's many platforms that exist where you can then say, well, what are the companies you can work with and how do we integrate? And that is sort of, in our home industry is still a very vertical, very controlled market where people try to, preserve their position. And that's not going to work because I really think that defense has to evolve much more in this horizontal, much more in the software platform-oriented way.
That's fascinating and leads to my last question for the Minister, because you've got 2 minutes, which is, are you already seeing Western partner militaries and military, sort of not just defense companies, but the actual military themselves come and try and learn from you about how you are doing this? Because it is a very different approach.
We would be always grateful for all the help we get from day one. And we would be always happy to share our lessons back, because that's the lessons we paid the highest price for, lives of our people. And I would be happy if this war stops where we are, and then we win, and then no other single country is involved. But others should be ready. That's why I'm happy here to promote defense industry, and I would like to remind everyone that defense industry is your guarantee that the war doesn't come to your country. And again, defense tech is an important part of defense industry. That's something we should be learning all together. I'm happy that we got innovations like Helsing, like Planet in my country, and that's how we can integrate it, and that's how we can make alive to something new.
Thank you. Thank you very much for what you're doing.
My heart is crying because I have to leave, but I'm leaving you in proper hands, in good hands. So it was a pleasure.
Wonderful that you made time. I hope I see you in Kiev soon. Let's continue with what this means for the eco, because the notion of the ecosystem that you are describing is, as you say, quite different from the way that defense tech has been traditionally done. Do you think your German and other Western partners recognize the degree to which Ukraine is at the forefront of innovation and how much, therefore, they need to change?
I think we're just scratching the surface. And I think this is a great sort of panel title because it's we're talking about sort of the changing nature of warfare, and underlying that change, and I'll talk about it in a second, is sort of a constant, which is the nature of war. The nature of war is the same, right? You basically have a measure, right? Russia aggresses with a huge amount of classical land mass and moves in. And then there's a countermeasure, which was essentially in the beginning Ukrainian superior satellite reconnaissance, which played a huge role in the beginning and still does. But coupled that with drones, and I think Will made an interesting point. In the West, we used to take that example, that we analyze strategic satellite data over days and weeks with humans because we've got time. This is strategic analysis. Ukraine showed this has to happen tactically, right? And you heard the frequency at which Will is able to provide that. And actually, this fed sort of tactical decision making. But that means you can't do that with humans anymore. You need to have software and AI help you seep through that huge amount of data. And that changed, the battlefield because, clearly, you now needed to hide more, and it became a game of hide and seek. And the next phase, I think what we've been seeing is that Ukraine, took the lessons from the 2014 time and took drones to feed into artillery. But again, Ukraine took this to a whole other scale, right? We're talking about thousands of drones used up per month. And having hundreds of drones up there in parallel, again, requires you to work with software, requires you to use, increasingly AI, make sense of things. And today we see something that we've never seen before, a front line that stretches, it's very long already, but it's also very deep. Because everything within that sort of front line is transparent. And this is a depth, I won't maybe mention the exact length, but because you can make derivations from it, but it's much deeper than we ever learned in the West. And that changes things. All of a sudden, certain capabilities that only have 2 kilometers range are worthless. And now I think what we're going to see is, again, in the classic nature of measure meets countermeasure meets countermeasure, this is not going to end, right? We're going to see, the minister said it, drones need counter-UAS drone capabilities that will be met with swarms. And so we're going to see all that pan out, and we can already predict that. What does it mean, I think, for ecosystems? I think, in a world like this where things are changing so quickly, and we're talking here about 3 or 4 evolutions in 2 years, so innovation cycles of, say, 6 months, that's something you can only meet, with software increasingly coming in, and then, plugging in hardware and being much faster. Our Western notion is that we plan defense a bit like in 7-8 year cycles, the way we build cars. And that's just not feasible. So we need to think much differently, much more open, much more connected, and basically, I think it's not a small change. I think it's sort of a 90-degree shift in how we think about it and how we adopt that. And I think that's something where we need to be a little more humble. And sometimes because we talk about so much about what we deliver, we forget that we actually need to also be humble as the West in what we learn from it if we want to be deterrent.
Interesting. Maria, you see the consequences of this. You see the impact it has on people, on lives. And you gave some wonderful examples of simple innovations, making do with when you had to make do with different things. Do you think there are some of this AI, or not even AI, but sort of digital innovation potentially changing combat medicine too? I mean, I'm just imagining whether there are different ways in thinking about combat medicine if you have these capabilities.
I would say it. So we have a lot of use of using digital tools in civil medicine, and this definitely can be used in field hospital or in civilian hospital. The combat medicine, though, is demanding very simple results, and the point is that it is the field where people often try to find some rocket science, which is absolutely not rocket science, and it's just simple things that have to be done, sometimes with money, as Minister said, and sometimes there might be some innovations that could have been done in a physics class by a schoolboy or schoolgirl that just need to be invented and done. So there is a very simple thing that kills people in combat medicine. It's the temperature. So most of the winter time, it's our worst enemy. And we know how to fight Russians. We know how to do the most complex medical stuff. We use ultrasounds right on the field. We can transfuse blood right on the field. We just have not yet invented anything that can fit into a backpack, which can really warm a patient up. So I might ask people in this audience, do you want to work on something like this? We have very simple things like hand warmers. You can buy them for, I don't know, €1 or something like that. It's the metal powder, right, that gets warm. How many of them do you need? It will be the whole backpack of these things. We need to warm blood up. I have disassembled a blood warmer. I guess I can assemble it back and it will work. We just need more of them, or we need to start manufacture them more.
That's a fantastic challenge for those people who are watching this. I mean, there have to be innovative solutions to this. There has to be a way to find something that warms someone up and that you can fit in a backpack.
And mostly people, when they hear that the problem is that simple and there has to be some simple solution, they say, oh, that's not rocket science. Well, sometimes it is, because it's 10 years of war in Ukraine, 2 years of full-scale war when the whole world is watching, and we still have 3 to 5 manufacturers in the world that produce the thing that every soldier has and has to have, is the tourniquet for blood, for controlling external hemorrhages of the limbs. There are 3 to 5 manufacturers in the whole world. And in summer 22, you could not buy a tourniquet anywhere in the world. If you were Department of Defense of United States or you were a volunteer from Ukraine, you could not buy it because the production lines were bought out until autumn. And then I thought, what if war comes to other countries? Can any innovation help with this? You just need to have more production lines. So that's the thing that I often think of, that people often miss medicine out or think that we'll only need some very complex ideas, but it's just the regular things that have to be done in very, very big quantities. Another thing that we discuss a lot, and we try to share that experience, is the level of training of a soldier, because the wars that have been, which experience we take to learn how to do military medicine, these wars allowed high level of medical care to be very close to the patient. So this is how the golden hour concept was invented. Golden hour means that from point of injury to the hospital, patient is taken in 60 minutes. So it's the best time that you can provide first aid, first care to the patient and bring him to the hospital. Golden hour died in Ukraine, and I'm not sure it will ever be in any other war. And I'm not sure that any country of NATO is really thinking that it is possible, that you will not have air superiority, that you will not have medevacs in the air, and you will have to use these tracked robots to evacuate a patient from a trench or from a city building or something like that. So this was our Bible. Golden hour was everything we put attention to. It does not exist anymore. So we have to train soldiers in things that are very complex. And we have always said, a soldier is dumb. He will never know how to pack a wound and loosen up the tourniquet. Patient will lose blood, patient will lose life. We don't do that. We have to do that now, because the amount of times that we have done this on the radio, knowing that another 8 hours, we have absolutely no means to get to this patient, and we say to the soldier who's with him, how does the limb look? How does he feel? How many hours have been gone? So we're now teaching them these complex things. And when our soldiers go to Germany for training, or to other countries as well, they are sometimes only taught how to put a tourniquet on. And they're like, oh, we know that already, teach us more. And all of the partners said, well, we don't do anything more. We call a medic. We call a medevac. There is no innovation to that. And I hate to be that, and I hate to say this on this scene, but maybe the military innovation of dealing with the enemy can help. Best medicine is artillery, right? But in combat medicine, some of innovations just need more and more money to produce them a lot. And some of innovations must be in hands of people. So you can put a surgeon in a trench. You have to teach soldier everything that he can do, is capable of doing on his stage of care.
And that, I mean, that's absolutely fascinating and very sobering. Are there not people in the Bundeswehr or in the US military thinking, oh, we need to actually think about what happens if we can't get our people out? Or are they just assuming that medevac and all of that would always be there?
They're very much thinking of that because, as I've said, the golden hour is the Bible. So that Bible is called Tactical Combat Casualty Care, TCCC, TC3 if you might. It is a protocol guideline for all levels of care, from soldier to surgeon, which is updated every year. It has not been updated since December 21 because they are observing, and no guidelines have been released since that. And it's just a matter of the time. I mean, we always give data. We say it will not work like that. Let's work together on that. We have a biggest respect for it because we have been doing this, and it's the only thing that really works. But we need to update it and understand that it gets much broader than simple tourniquet for a soldier. So
that's absolutely fascinating. Will, I mean, first, I was going to say to you before, you know a bunch of people in San Francisco who could come up with these innovations.
Well, I can certainly advertise the problem.
I think that's absolutely. But more specifically on the kinds of innovation that you think Planet's data could foster. I mean, you started off, you gave some examples of things that have happened so far. What are the areas you think that your data will be able to help in? What are people talking to you about? What do you think is the sort of next stage?
Well, the satellite data is going to get better and better with time. Higher resolution, higher temporal resolution, more frequent, that is, and more spectral resolution, so more colors. We're launching a fleet of satellites that have 400 colors, and why does that matter? Then you can tell where a tank came from, directly, which place did it get built, because each paint shop has slightly different colored paint, and so you can tell things like that, and you can look through camouflage, and there's things like that. But I think the most exciting development is going to be in the field of, and we're increasing. We just launched our first satellite that will have satellite-to-satellite communication such that we can get the data back much faster. So instead of 3 hours, it's going to be about 30 minutes from tasking a satellite to get a picture back. And that's really important for quick response, obviously. But I think the most interesting area is going to be artificial intelligence on top of it. You'll note that Google and Facebook and the like all open source a lot of their AI tools, but they don't open source any of their data. The data is the asset on which you train artificial intelligence to actually have value. And Planet obviously has this deep stack of images, 2,500 images on the whole of the world on average, and you can train artificial intelligence on that. I think where this is going is what I call something like queryable Earth, the ability to search the planet. You could think of it as Planet GPT. Now all these models have been trained on the text of the internet so that you can search it with just simple text and get answers that seem pretty comprehensive about most topics. So can we do that about what's going on the Earth? Whether that's to find Russian tanks, whether it's to find mass graves, you should be able to just say, hey, find all the mass graves, tell me how long they took to build, where did the vehicles come from that did that, where did Prigozhin just go? You know, oh, he went over here in Belarus, or he was shot down in a plane over here. Like all of these things, there's no reason why large language models applied to our data shouldn't enable you to have a much simpler interface, so that you don't need geospatial analysts to get value out of this, but rather everyone on the ground can get value out of that, just like just like GPT has helped everyone get, if you like, easier access to the information on the internet. I think that's really exciting. I just also want to comment on the question you were asking about governments. I think they are being extremely slow in figuring out how much has changed on the ground. My basic answer to your earlier question would be no. They haven't really recognized it at all, only very theoretically, you know. They're not thinking, how does that change warfare if it ever came to their shores? And then I would say one other thing about this whole information revolution on the side of what's happening in Ukraine. It has also been important for cohering the West and allied countries in support of Ukraine. Because part of the reason it's so hard, Europe has to go through tough energy winters with higher prices, is not used to, this is hardly a problem compared with the problems you're facing. But it matters because it matters for in our democracies for who gets elected. And if people don't think this is important, it matters to their support. And so when the New York Times or the BBC or whoever asks for our images, or The Economist, yeah, thank you, you did some great stuff, we provide that imagery, and pictures can speak 1,000 words. They can show the atrocities that the Russians are doing. They can, you know, as you put it in The Economist, to quote you guys, since I didn't just a second ago, help to lift the fog of war and help everyone to understand what's going on. And I think that massively helps open societies and democracies. Whereas social media, you have this challenge, which misinformation spreads faster than truth often. In fact, it's been proved to spread faster because it's helpful for ads on social media, which is a troublesome dynamic. But satellite data doesn't lie. Drone data doesn't lie. All this triangulation can help us to figure out the truth of the situation and combat that misinformation and help us have a common fabric of understanding, which is critical for all of our societies to run, as well as support for Ukraine.
That's a really important point. It's also a very good point to which to open up this conversation. I could talk to you guys for hours, but I'm conscious that there may be people in the audience who have questions. Anyone? Yes, gentleman there.
Hi, Henrik Jones, venture capitalist, San Francisco, and wanted to ask you about building trust in doing business in Ukraine, because that is, you know, Ukraine has a reputation risk. I went to Ukraine in 2006 to invest, thought it was uninvestable, and ran. In 2023, we made several investments. One was Anthropic, and the other was funding a venture fund in Ukraine. And it's extraordinary how Ukraine has changed. And so I'm curious on how one can, you know, build trust. Your experience, are they paying their bills on time? How do they pay? Did you have any reputation risk at Helsing? I don't know if you're on a, but how do you, you see where my question, I don't know if you have, I wish I could have asked the general here, but it'd be really helpful to build Ukraine's, you know, having people trust Ukraine. So.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we have certain operations in Ukraine, and my experience has been that, you know, there is a dual process. Obviously, the first priority of Ukraine is to win this war and win it quickly. But the second one is also, of course, to show to the international community, you know, that is lending support, and, you know, also to the EU that it wants to exceed, that it is a sort of country that is, whilst it's under this tremendous pressure, is also changing at a pace that is unbelievable, right? And so I find that, you know, concretely in the way that, you know, contracting goes mainly through the partner nations. So I don't know about but most of the work that gets done there, either you do pro bono for free, which we did initially, or you do with international partners, and that tends to work very well and is very well orchestrated and is very well aligned, and depends a little bit on country by country how it's exactly done, but it's certainly done with an eye to to getting both of those priorities across, right, and sort of being a good trusted partner. So I think it's important to sort of partly also change that narrative and make that transparent. And I think that's the experience. And I certainly, every encounter I've had, I've found people to try and be very clear on that. If anything, I think you saw maybe you see the domestic debate in Ukraine is very much actually on that. There's a lot of accountability, from what I can tell, in the media on trying to sort of hold government accountable whilst actually under this tremendous pressure. I find that quite remarkable.
I would only add, most of the experience is exactly the same, but contrary to what we were talking about earlier about how slow Western countries have been to figure out how to use this technology that Ukraine is figuring out very quickly themselves, they have been quick to help Ukraine get access to them and help support that. We have one partnership that happened within 24 hours with the Ministry of Defense in the West. I've never seen that ever in my life before. And that happened because they wanted to help Ukraine. Yeah. So there have been situations like that where, because it's considered an emergency situation, somehow it gets a different track process. And so there's been occasional goodness out of that.
Yeah. Actually, they're making them. The funny thing is that they're making Western countries better in procurement. The best defense procurement you'll see in the West is when it's for Ukraine.
Yeah.
Somehow,
really? That's what I'm saying.
Somehow that process never translates into the other world. And don't ask me why, but it just doesn't. But they're making procurement better in the West, and maybe we're just trying to show our best side. One other thing maybe that one sees is Ukraine is increasingly trying to make sure that there's equitable access for different companies, because they've got so many companies locally. So they're building platforms. Brave One is one of them that the Ministry of Digital Transformation is putting up, where multiple sort of local companies can reach out. And the idea is a bit, access should be for free. Everybody should have access to the government and the ministry, and then it's about the best one wins. So it's a revolutionary notion also for us here in the West, that defense could actually be about the best technology and not the best access. And I think that's something we should also learn. Certainly very encouraging for young companies.
A very short comment on that. It may not apply for very new technologies or those who are of high secrecy, but many medical companies that do medical equipment have a great training range if they get data back. So we are now using $150,000 ventilators, which are compact, that could be put in any evacuation, even in a pickup truck that we often use for evacuation. We use them for free because we give data back. And it's a win-win situation, and I think there's a lot of technology that can benefit from that.
That's really interesting. Question here.
My name is Thomas Weyer. I found discussion very uplifting somehow, and what I take away is Europe has to get a little bit more like Ukraine, and then we'll be fine. Does this also apply to China? Because, as newspaper reader, I see that technological innovation and artificial intelligence is something that some people say China is very strong in. And if to look at the global development over the next 5-10 years, are we going to be fine if we're just a little bit more like Ukraine?
I'm happy to talk about that. So China is an interesting one. I think I think this discussion on China might be moving ahead is actually one that we've had for a few years. There's some people, Eric Schmidt is a notable one, that spend a lot of time studying that frequently, and I think the current sort of, I would say, consensus in the community is that we're still ahead in the West, but clearly a country the size of China with the articulated ambition, and also with the data, the vast amounts of data that they have, and the idea that you can have civil-military fusion, meaning everything that's there in the commercial world can also be applied to the military and vice versa, is obviously something that you have to sort of reckon with. So I think one really important lesson we need to take from this current conflict is, we should not should not be asleep at the wheel, right? This is something that happens very quickly. This is not a question of 10 years. This is a question that's decided in the next 3 to 5 years. And I would add, Ukraine, the war happened because there was not enough deterrence, clearly. Right? Wars start when it's too tempting and the cost-benefit calculation tilts. And I think what we need to realize is sometimes when I look at where we're spending our money in the West in defense, I have a feeling that we're preparing for a war of attrition. We should be preparing for deterrence. So we need to be so far ahead. We need to have such an edge sustainably, and that basically nobody would ever be tempted. And I struggle to see, yes, we need masks for that, but clearly, in today's world, that will have a lot to do with software and AI. and use of data. And I think we need to think and talk a lot more about that and link that to our ambition as democracies, which is ultimately deterrence and not wars of attrition.
If I could just add just one point, we tend to estimate in Silicon Valley that the AI in China is about 6 months behind. And in space technology, it used to be, we would always say, at least 5 years behind. But now they've been rapidly catching up, probably more like a year to 2 years behind, which is marching orders in a way. It's a bright red line for everyone in the West to start realizing the Chinese are going to have a similar capability in space to what the US and other Western countries have very soon. And not only should, therefore the West leverage it for their own benefit, they should leverage it because it's strategic in that arms race. And so, incredibly insightful point, I think.
We probably have time for a couple more questions. Anybody else got a question? Yes, back.
I'm Marisa Lutsevich, Chatham House, London. I have a question about, other than drones and unmanned warfare, what else is there that can help Ukraine win this war? General Zaluzhny wrote the article in The Economist about technological advantage, and honestly, this is the best pathway to victory, giving the resources and the way Ukraine is fighting this war. Did he, I'm sure you read this article, did he get it all? Did he miss something? Where else is the opportunity?
So I'll answer it in a couple of layers. So first of all, I think there are very clear areas, and he articulated some of the problems, and to those there are solutions, where very concrete technology, also including AI, can play a big role of the answer. I believe so much so, and I believe actually also so near term, that it's not a great place to talk about them quite yet. But secondly, I think, and maybe slightly more broadly, I think the challenge also for Ukraine will be then also to scale those things up. They've been very innovative things. So you've seen attacks on the infamous sort of Navy, the Russian Navy, right? This would have been unimaginable, right? That this would be feasible. But you need to sort of be able to sort of scale that up, sustain that, and do that at the scale of this full-scale invasion. So I think scaling up after sort of you've got the innovations, the second challenge I wouldn't underestimate. A lot of the innovations we see, and there's been some great reporting also from the front lines, tends to sort of be in certain units, but not everywhere. And obviously, so I think the next to this advantage that will come, that will link a little bit to what I talked about earlier, the countermeasures that are needed for the current measures, will then also be a question of how quickly can you industrialize it, right? How can you get the 1 million drones that the president talked about, which is a different thing from the current scale that we're seeing. So scale is still a second challenge, I would say, orthogonal to the individual capabilities that I think we'll see come out this year.
Thank you. One last one? Was no more hands up? Yes, this is the last question. Go ahead.
Just one question to Will. You talked a lot about satellites. Do you have any pictures with you that you might want to show us?
What a leader! I think we shared a couple of pictures. If you want to see, pictures can show 1,000 words. This was the Saki Air Base the day after it was attacked successfully by the Ukrainians. Next one. This was an interesting one showing the sort of broad scale when Prigozhin was going up towards Moscow and then turned left and went into Belarus. The question was, where did he turn up? Where did the troops turn up? And because we were scanning all of Belarus, so we found where those troops turned up. There's a Wagner group in Belarus. Next one, I think there's maybe just one more. This was to the point about the humanitarian help. This is the work that I mentioned that NASA harvested on our data, field by field crop analysis to help track food security for Ukraine.
I print out the first one to carry in the wallet. It's just warming the heart. Destroyed Russian planes, right? If I may just give a couple of examples of how technology is helping now and why it is so crucial that it's not only the things that is procured by governments, it's a thing that everyone has on smartphones. So we use satellite imaging for evacuation routes. Despite of instead of sending infantry platoon to search to check, we just see like where's the good river or where's the good road. We use ChatGPT for army bureaucracy. It's good that minister is not here, but I have written so many reports with ChatGPT, and it's great.
That's
and
hilarious.
it helps a lot. But the thing which is, so some things are funny, and some things are the only ones that produce next technology is the statistics that we gather. So the whole tactical medicine was built on TCCC cards. It's a card about your patient that you fill in, and Americans were so rough with their soldiers about filling it out. When I was training, we have never been shouted at so much as if we did not do the TCCC card. So you can fail with push-ups, you can fail with a vein, but if you don't do a TCCC card, you know you do 100 push-ups. And this is why they had so many data on their patients, and they knew that number one reason of loss of patients is hemorrhage, not anything else. This is why we do tourniquets, tourniquets, tourniquets. And we use it now. We use it now with our data, and we already have our statistics about blood transfusion. So any skeptical people who said no, they will never do that in trenches. How would you warm them up? How would you deliver that blood? There's the statistics, and we sent it into a software program which was done by my friend who just uses, I guess, an iPhone and nothing else. So she has just done that Excel thing. Through all the data from our patients in, and now we show that statistics. And this is how new technology will grow, because this will be the reason for demand. This is why my governments might say we need more blood warmers, and this is why some of you might start a startup on blood warmers. Please do that.
Please.
What a wonderful place to end. What a fantastic conversation. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your work. Thanks, Zanny.